What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Corey Austin Theorem, where I just simply talk life. And life as it relates to someone who has been using and also misusing and or abusing substances for the majority of at least my adult life. Started in the experimental stage earlier on, then kind of tended to progress from there. A lot of you guys are familiar with the story. You're like, yep, that's me. It's kind of like you start to see red flags, and then a little later on, at some point throughout your adult life, you realize, oh, damn, well, maybe I kind of got a problem, whereas Joe Blow over here next to me does some of the same things I do, but he just kind of does them differently. I'm kind of on another level with them. I always tend to push a little too hard and far. That's what I talk about on this channel, basically. So if you're into that sort of real but raw self-help, sort of discussions where I don't claim to be a professional. I mean, I have a 4-year degree in human development, family studies. So I'm not completely clueless, but I'm no psychiatrist. I'm no, communications expert. I am no doctor of any sort. So this is obviously not medical or mental space advice. But when it comes to people who tend to overuse substances, there are so many things that we have in common, right? And there's so many things that we can learn from each other. In fact, pretty much everything that we can learn, we have to learn from each other. Because if we don't, and we're just left to our own devices, we're trying to look at Joe Blow over here, who's never had a problem with substances, and just trying to be like them. Well, you're not like them. We're completely different from them in a lot of ways. And, a lot of people do get to a point, I think, in their lives and in their maturity where even if they've identified substance use or abuse as a problem, I do believe people can get to a point where, they just don't go hard like they used to. They still want to dabble in it, this, that, and the third, but I'm just getting too old for that shit. You might have a health problem here or there show up that kind of scares you straight a little bit. And, I've done that many times throughout my life and been through long periods of time where, yeah, I'm pretty healthy. I'm still using stuff, but, it's moderate. I'm not using too much of one thing. I'm just kind of microdosing here and there on different sort of things, People are probably like, I'll call bullshit on that. No, seriously. But, it's one of those things where if you appreciate that sort of raw honesty, someone just kind of vlogging their own experience with this sort of thing, as an almost 50-year-old man who's been around for a little bit, subscribe to the channel. Because a lot of people say just hearing someone's perspective helps. You don't have to be, this scholar who has all these well thought out, concise, succinct points that you've assembled together neatly into a little, it doesn't have to be that way. Sometimes just someone giving their raw experience, right? And that's kind of what I do on this channel. I mean, I've talked about my experience with pain pills back in the day. I would steal your pain pills from you. If I were in your house and you had some pain pills stored away somewhere in your bathroom, I would ask to use your bathroom so that I could then look through your cabinets and see if you had any old or new. Didn't really matter to me. The only difference was if they were new and it looked like the person was actively using the prescription, I'd be like, well, let me just take, 2 or 3, they're not addicted to this shit like I am, so they're not going to be sitting there counting their pills, they'll never know, and I never had anybody approach me about it other than my parents. I've talked about my parents, specifically my mom, earlier on had several back surgeries and stuff like that, so she kind of had to take some sort of narcotic. She didn't abuse it, but it is kind of what got me hooked on it. And and I stole them from them. I'm not proud of this, by the way. It just goes to show you there's a perfect storm in your life, and enough amount of things happen to be going wrong or working against you collectively all at one time, and then you throw a certain substance into the mix of that person in that season of their life, sometimes it's just too much. And sometimes people just completely lean on it, completely lean into it, right? And I think you can get to a point where you realize, I have to be able to take this stuff more for my recreation, and the higher I'm getting, the more often I'm getting there, the worse it's going to be for me in the long run, the worse it's going to be in the long term. Because the higher you get and the more often you're doing it, especially with something like kratom or 7-hydroxy, or from what I understand, even alcohol. I've never been big into alcohol in that way, so I've never experienced any sort of alcohol withdrawal or anything like that, but I've certainly heard it about benzodiazepines as well. If you do it too much, too often, you're going to get physically dependent upon it. Once you get physically dependent, it becomes really, really hard to then back your way out of the mess that you've worked your way into, if that's making sense, right? So I think that's where a channel that's kind of anecdotal like this really does benefit a lot of people, because I think people see a guy like me. You guys are just like a bunch of friends, basically. You're about the only friends I talk to be honest with you. Other than you guys, I'm at home with my family, my wife, my 2-year-old, my 19-year-old. I hardly ever see him because he's working full time, and me and him are like ships passing in the night, as they say. But I have you guys that I talk to about it, and I think that's what benefits people. They see me, they're like, oh, I can relate to him. I can relate to a lot of that stuff. Yeah, I get it, man. So that's kind of where, this channel comes from, and kind of what my purpose is on the channel, to just kind of be a beacon of light. Like, hey, whether you decide to be completely abstinent in life, or whether you decide you're still going to try to use, I preach on here about accepting and rectifying the fact that not everyone is going to go for or run to a life of complete abstinence. Now, are we talking about what's really best for somebody who tends to abuse drugs? Is it better for them to be abstinent long term, i.e. forever, never take a mind-altering substance again? That is quite possible. I am absolutely here willing to admit that I think for most people, if they did it right, they got all the therapy involved, they worked through all their shit, all their past trauma, and went through a program like NA and AA and had 7, 10, 15 years sobriety, I'm sure that is a great accomplishment and a great feeling, and I'm sure they're happier in the end than what they would have been had they continued to use substances. But I will say this, despite all of that, there is a large portion of people who, I only live this life once, bro. As far as I know, I'm not getting reincarnated. I'm not coming back. I want to live my life the way I want to live it. I want to do it my way, like Frank Sinatra. I want to do it my way, bro. And I'm kind of one of those people, to be honest with you. I'm a free spirit in that way, and that's why I'll still, drink sometimes. And I've talked about, taking the legal, like, head shop THC products, whether it be some gummies, or my wife and I'll, hit a little bit of the Delta 8 on the weekend while we're having some drinks, that sort of thing. But there's just certain things that I've come to the conclusion of I can't do. 7-hydroxy, I can't do. It's too strong. It's too powerful. It gets me way too hooked. And then the way it starts to interact with me, it does it in a way where I'm having to dose on it every couple of hours or so. And I just got to a really bad spot with that. I'm not saying that in the future at some point I may not start taking some kratom powder again, because I was always okay on the kratom powder. Things only really went south for me when I started doing like the MIT 45s back in the day and all that. And then, of course, I was off that and powder and everything for a good 7 or 8 months. And then I had the bright idea of trying the 7-hydroxy while I was on vacation. And that's what got me hooked, to where I ended up having to go to detox You can watch that video, by the way. I'll try to link it down in the description. It's got a lot of views. But only time ever going to detox. Don't ever want to go to detox again. So 7-hydroxy, I'll never touch that again. Kratom powder, one day, maybe. After I've given my body some time to kind of reacclimate to life without any substances. Live a balanced life. If you're one of those people, hey, I'm going to use because I only live this life once. Well, for those people, there's got to be some sort of solution. What is it? Well, you have to learn some better cognitive behavioral management. You got to figure out how to manage it, how to get on a regimen with different things, you know, whether it be different substances or different outlets that you put your time into, hobbies, that sort of thing, mixed in with, you know, in a very medicinal sort of way, medicating yourself with this substance, but not too often and not too much. You know, you have to be on a wave of maintaining it. You can't be in a place where you're just really hard for long periods of time, because it's going to bite you in the ass every time. And maybe it's a maturity thing. Maybe it's just an addict thing. A lot of people believe that's the case, that addicts just can't use stuff like that responsibly. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think it depends on what the substance is and where the person is at in their lives during the period of time that that substance is introduced to them. You know, every substance that I've ever used in succession regularly has always come at a specific time of my life to serve a certain purpose for me right then, right? And I'm at a very good, secure part of my life now. You know, my wife and I are established. I have a beautiful family, beautiful home with a lake behind it, a hot tub. Everybody's healthy. You know, I have a good job, so does my wife. Everything to be grateful for, I have those things, right? And you couldn't say that was true for myself 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was on pain pills really bad and stuff. You know, things weren't really working out for me at that time. I was in my first marriage, which wasn't a great one. You know, I take a lot of responsibility for why that wasn't a great marriage. I mean, it takes two to tango, always. But I take responsibility for that, for my part in that, and in that marriage failing. And I was facing a heavy addiction to pain pills, and trying to work and provide for a young son and a family, and trying to juggle all that. It was just too much. I basically broke under it. And that's when I started, you know, my porn addiction kind of started taking over. I wasn't married anymore. I was kind of single. So then this, you know, sexual beast kind of awoke inside me, and that's all I thought about. You know, even as a late 20s, early 30s, up into the mid 30s young man, that's all I was thinking about was sex. You know, if it wasn't sex with somebody, it was porn, and porn wasn't even enough. I wanted to try different things, kept trying to push it, my partners, to get more and more spicy. The problem with me is I'm the type of person that was always attracted to girls who are nice girls, like quality driven, moral women, right? That's who I'm attracted to, because in my mind, if you're not like that, I don't want to have anything to do with you. But the problem was, I was the one that wasn't moral. I have morals. I know what's right or wrong, probably more so than some people. But I just had these addictions, and not just substances, but to porn and sex. And I had these addictions driving me, you know, to always make the wrong choices. And I wasn't able to overcome that for a lot of my life. And I'm a completely different person now. So that's a good segue into, I do believe that people can get to a point in their lives where, yeah, they can use certain substances and just not go too ham with it. And I think I'm at that point. I'm not ready to say that I could do that with kratom powder specifically. I'll never use the 7-hydroxy again, that's for sure. May try the kratom powder again at some point at a moderate dose, but never again will I do any extract or 7-hydroxy or anything of the sort. Never will I do that again, because my body and my mind can't handle that. But pulling for all of you guys out there, I'm gonna go, and I hope you guys are all doing well out there. Thanks so much for listening to the channel. If you would subscribe to it, that helps the algorithm. Like the video as well. Comment down below, kind of let me know what your own experience is. I promise, guys, I do read comments from time to time. Recently, I just haven't been having time to do it. I know you guys have probably seen my responses and stuff start to drop off. I'm just an extremely busy person. But I do read a lot of your guys' comments and appreciate all of you taking the time to listen and to comment. You can hit that thanks button if you'd like to drop your boy a few bones for the time that he spends on this. You don't have to. That's not a requirement, obviously. Just subscribe to the channel. You know, my wife and I are blessed. We make good money. We're good. But I'll never turn down a couple of bones. I mean, I'll always hold $1. I mean, if you're going to give it to me. You know what I'm saying? But love y'all very much. And I hope y'all have a wonderful, wonderful Thanksgiving, and hope everyone gets to spend it with their families. I know I will. And maybe I'll make one over the holidays, maybe I won't. Alright guys, love y'all. Talk to you later. Peace.